This morning on BRN Sunday, where will the election impact retirement plans? Joining me now to help break it all down, Levine and Kevin Walsh are both principals with Groom Law Group, and that's an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C., and we affectionately refer to them as the Legal Eagles. Eagles, so great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning on the program.
It's great to be here, Jeff. We're thrilled to be with you live and in person. So we're excited to talk about a lot because we're getting close to the election.
Yeah, Kevin, I don't know if you are aware, but there is going to be a presidential election this year, Congress, the U.S. Senate. I want to ask you, get your thoughts about the makeup of the U.S. Congress, what that potentially could look like, and what the impact could potentially be on legislation.
So, on the legislative front, when we look at the beginning of next year, one thing that we've got to keep in mind is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which provided for a number of tax changes at the individual level, it expires largely. And so whether we have a Democratic Congress or a Republican Congress, whether or not we have President Trump or President Harris, next year we're going to see Congress trying to figure out which pieces of the tax bill to keep in place, and also what to change. If we have a Harris administration, it's likely that we see the state and local tax benefit come back with greater more of that. If we see a Trump administration, it's likely that we see other tax breaks for people. Now, if we look at the retirement front, what we're going to see, though, is a need to pay for these tax benefits. And every time we see a tax bill come up before Congress, we've got this zombie that rises from the dead. We're also near Halloween as well as the election. And the zombie that we constantly see is rothification of IRA contributions and 401k contributions, requiring that folks make those contributions after tax. And also we see proposals to do things like cap the amount of money that folks can have in their 401k plan. And so I think next year, regardless of the outcome of the election, to the extent that folks want to provide big tax benefits elsewhere, we're going to have to see if the retirement system needs to protect itself again. David, do you want to add anything?
Sure. One thing I'll add is, and I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said, Kevin, I think there's sort of another texture to this. There's a lot of retirements in Congress. There's a lot of turnover. And there are a lot of champions who've been around for years of championing bipartisan retirement legislation. It's gotten a little harder to move retirement legislation. So one of the big questions is how will retirement legislation be viewed? Will it go back to being bipartisan or not? A classic example of something to watch for are two things. Number one, Secure 2.0. There has been a discussion draft of legislation for technical corrections, cleanup items, and everything for Secure 2.0. We've talked about that with you, Jeff, before, about that's been out for a while. Will we be able to get, whether in the lame duck, the period after the election before the new Congress comes in, any of that moving? We'll see. That also includes like 403B and CITs that everybody thinks is coming, but it keeps taking time. And similarly, there's already a lot of talk. There's been discussions about Secure 3.0, sort of the next gen. And the question is, and I think the way you respond to that, Jeff, is spot on, because we have to see, will there be an interest, a focus, a willingness to focus on this, or are other issues going to drown it out? Or bluntly, is retirement going to be looked at as the piggy bank to pay for changes, as Kevin talked about?
Yeah, really good point, David and Kevin. David, I want to talk about the regulatory front. Let's talk about the agencies, because the agencies could look different if the presidential election, I'm sorry, I can't talk this morning, goes one direction versus the other.
Absolutely. I'll start with the IRS, and maybe Kevin can talk about the Department of Labor a little bit. The IRS, in the world of benefit and retirement plans, is nonpartisan. It is career staff running all the way up pretty high in the process. So they're going to keep moving. But of course, political direction on top and focus can evolve and change. For instance, in the Trump era, in the Trump administration before, you saw things like on the healthcare side, like individual health reimbursement accounts. You see things about flexibility where they came out with association retirement plans, ARPs. So you could see some change in things, and the IRS is not alone in that space. The IRS, I think, as we look forward into the next year, regardless of who wins, is going to have to focus on Secure 2.0 and secure guidance. We're still waiting on final long-term part-time employee issues, which gets weedy, but the key takeaway is there's a lot of nuance there that people are concerned, interested, worried about. There's, to where Kevin began, there's the implementation that got delayed 2 years and guidance on mandatory Roth for people who earn over $145,000 a year, catch-up contributions. All these things, especially with the super catch-up, the age 60 to 63, higher catch-up limits kicking in next year, there's going to be a lot of focus on that next year. So I think that's where the IRS will go. Could you see some macro policy changes depending on who's in the White House? Yes. If it's Vice President Harris who becomes president, maybe a little more consistency. If it's former President Trump who becomes president, yes, you could see definitely some switch on where we're going. To me, the big area where there could be a lot going on is the Department of Labor. So I look to my friend, Mr. Walsh, for his commentary on that.
Yeah, and Kevin, just to kind of set that up, I mean, I think we've got a new financial advice rule that is being considered. I think it's called the Retirement Security Rule. There's ESG. There's a lot of things that have come out that potentially could have a different flavor depending on how things work out.
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, we're in a similar position to where we were 4 years ago with a lot of the rulemaking. And if we look at what's going on, if we have a Harris administration, which would be continuity largely from the Biden administration, then we will see a vigorous defense of that retirement security rule. We'll likely see sub-regulatory guidance that advises financial institutions on how to comply with that rule. We will likely also see changes over the next 4 years to reporting to require plans to provide more information publicly in a way that may be an asset to the plaintiff's bar or that may be used otherwise for investigations. So the Harris path will be some continuity. Staff will largely probably stay somewhat the same, if not the same. If we pivot to kind of a Trump administration, we'll see a lot of what we saw basically at the beginning of the Biden administration, where Trump did his own retirement security rule, Trump did his own ESG rule, Trump issued some sub-regulatory guidance letters. Biden administration comes in, Biden administration redoes retirement security rule, they redo ESG, they redo some of those letters. So, if there's a ping-ponging of the party that controls the White House, I would expect at this point that both ESG and retirement security rule have become sufficiently partisan that those will likely be the top priorities for a Trump administration. There could also be kind of more out there ideas about reforming the agency more broadly in ways where you're seeing financial institutions develop financial products, and you're seeing innovation in the land regulated by the SEC with Chair Gensler, and you're not seeing those same products get uptake in the retirement space. You could see an administration that says, if it's good enough for the SEC, then it should be good enough for a defined benefit plan or a defined contribution plan or an IRA holder.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. No matter who wins, the Senate has advice and consent. They will actually, I guess, there will be some confirmation hearings. Who runs labor, et cetera. That will be kind of, I guess, our first test. Just to kind of end things, though, I think a lot of plan sponsors, a lot of providers, are they waiting with bated breath? I mean, when I look at the election, David, I'm looking through the lens of retirement and savings and the things that need to get done. So what do you do in this interim period between the election being decided and inauguration?
Sure, a couple things. First of all, you've got to do your day-to-day. We're at the end of year for most plans. You've got your notices, you've got your compliance, you've got a lot of secure items you're still dealing with. That's what you focus on. If you are a plan sponsor, it's sort of, what do you want to add? What do you have? For the service providers, there's two pieces. There's what of the changes in law from security can you implement now? What do you want to implement now? Do you want pension-linked emergency savings accounts? Do you want the student loan match? All those different things get tossed in. On a more macro product design, to Kevin's point, I think you keep moving forward because the world constantly evolves, but you take stock of where things are and what you think it will be. But there is sort of a continuum. It just gyrates a little bit. So you just keep moving forward. I think the big thing is Kevin began, and I'll end where Kevin started. The real question is retirement a piggy bank or is retirement preserved? And that's the real question we have to see.
Yeah, and Kevin, last question for you: is that a playoff beard or for the election?
It's a beard where I've told my wife that I'll shave when she wants me to, and we've gone well past the point where I thought I would have gotten that order.
Yeah, it looks very nice, I got to say, gentlemen. Always great to see the Legal Eagles. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you again next month.
Sounds great.
Thanks for having us on, Jeff.
Thank you all.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Details at our website. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.